Brianna McWilliam. I'm an author, educator, Reiki practitioner, and creative arts therapist. I've been in the field for over 13 years now, and I am just wild and passionate about attachment theory, but specifically psycho-spiritual approaches in using creative arts therapies, interventions, and body-based interventions in working with attachment issues. Now, in this 5-part series, we're exploring the phenomenon of...
She says she knows she keeps hurting me, and to be honest, I don't think she will work on it anymore. I was too hard the first time, so why try to leave him again? It was too hard the first time. Yeah, I mean, and so I'm gonna diverge a little bit and talk about this. And you know, it's a little bit of, from what you've told me, and I won't go into the details out of respect for your privacy. I'll only talk about what you've shared so far. You know, this cycle of like getting with a dude, breaking up, and then stuff happens. It kind of sounds like she's caught in this cycle of abuse. This is called cycle of violence, but it's essentially the same as the cycle of abuse. You know, where there's this like calm phase, and she's getting with this guy, and things are going well, but then tension's kind of building up, fights are happening, and then there's some kind of abuse that happens. Doesn't always have to be like physical violence. It can be, you know, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, you know, all different types. And maybe there's even a breakup that happens as a result of that. But what happens is, if you go through this hot, cold cycle enough, you can actually end up in what's called like a trauma bond. And I would, for you in particular, I would really, I know I only hear her side, but I'm sure it's both sides causing issues. Oh yeah, of course. And I think that's a very mature take. 100% agree. It's always both sides in a relationship. Even if she's with an actual goddamn clinical narcissist or sociopath, there's still always two people that are responsible in a relationship. Even if her responsibility is just staying with the guy and not saying healthy boundaries. No one is ever blameless in a relationship. I hate that. This is me taking a second to be on a soapbox. I fucking hate how much information there is on the internet about one person's like the evil abuser and the other person's the helpless victim, and the helpless victim has no responsibility, and oh, you're victim shaming. Bullshit. Both people in a relationship always have accountability to take, even if your only accountability was, I should have set boundaries firmer, I should have left sooner, whatever. I should have spoken up more, whatever. So, you know, I think what's happening to this chick sounds awful, and my heart goes out to her. And also, she has a responsibility to wanna end stuff if she's caught in a dysfunctional relationship. And I get, as someone who loves her, that can be really hard to stand by her and see her make choices that aren't good for her. Lord knows I've been there, standing by someone who's choosing to make self-destructive decisions. Ultimately, all you can do is, you know, you can't control what she does, but you can control what you do. But yeah, I would say look into the cycle of abuse, like for your own, because I think with this chick, you need to get to the point where you can be, you need to get to the point where you can decide what you want to do. Oh, okay, you're good. Ads. Oh man, I need like an ad, incoming ad countdown thing. I need to do that.
Of the anxious avoidant trap. And I'm sharing with you in this series some of the content that is explored both in my self-directed online course curriculum, as well as in a 6-month live group coaching program that we will be starting in November. So I'm going to tell you more about that at the end of this video, but for right now, let's dive into the next part of our series. Now, in our first video, we explored some underlying dynamics of the anxious avoidant trap as a general introduction. And I basically explained to you that while some people think of this as a case of opposites attract, I really view it as a case of like sees like. And so if you missed the first video, I invite you to check it out on my blog. There's a link to that in the caption of this video. Okay. Now today, in our second video, we're going to go over 6 signs of the anxious avoidant trap. We're going to, on day 3, we're going to go over 4 neurochemicals that feed the anxious avoidant trap. Okay. On day 4, we're going to take a look at the role of fantasy and avoidance in the anxious avoidant trap. And then on day 5, we're going to look at 3 ways anxious and avoidant partners push each other away. All right. And so without any further ado, let's just dive into 6 signs of the anxious avoidant trap. Okay. Now, when couples disagree about the degree of closeness and intimacy that they each want in a relationship, it usually, and at least eventually, tends to dominate all aspects of the relationship, right? So, research on attachment has repeatedly shown that there are high levels of dissatisfaction and upset between individuals that have this kind of avoidant attachment style being magnetized to the anxious attachment style. So, I refer to this as rolling stones and open hearts, because I believe that language plays a huge role in how we can.
Also, I honestly hate the terms that she made that are essentially just duplicates of the attachment styles, but she calls them different names. It's my own soapbox about her, but it's the one thing that I don't like about her content.
Okay, and a lot of times when we step into the realms of psychology or psychoanalysis, the labels assigned to these things are actually detrimental in terms of we set out to fulfill these predestined things that these labels set out for us. So I try to use language that is a bit gentler and gives us a little more freedom in determining our own destinies, right? Now, in their book Attached by Heller and Levine, a very popular.
Also, speaking of this book Attached, I am very fervently wanting to start a book club with the people in the server. Speaking of which, people out there who are watching, if you're not in the official Discord server, you are missing out. We talk about cool mental health stuff. Feel free to join. However, one thing that I'm very ardently wanting to start up soon is a place to heal book club. So the first book that I would like to do, probably get this started, I don't know, sometime, I don't know, probably sometime this month, if not the beginning of next month. Attached, which is like the book on attachment theory. Jesus Christ, this is actually on my curriculum in grad school. I didn't get to read it because I didn't get to that class yet before I left my program. But this is like the Bible on attachment theory for like the, you know, non-professional reader. You buying mine, bro? I'll send you a copy. I don't care. Also, I'm personally. Oh, that's the other thing. I personally do audiobooks. If you have a Spotify account, Attached is free with your Spotify premium subscription. So if you have like Audible, that's totally cool. I used to have Audible, but then most of the books that I want to read are on Spotify, so I get it free. Yeah, no, I read audiobooks now on Spotify all the time, and they're free with my premium subscription. It's freaking amazing. Yes, exactly. I know, right? Especially if you have like long drive times, that's like premium book reading time. So I like really hardcore want to start up a book club for the server. We'll work on it. I will recruit all of you.
Book, I highly recommend reading it if you haven't. They also refer to the anxious avoidant trap as being something that you fall into without very much awareness, and then once you're caught, it's nearly impossible to get out of it. Okay, and so let's talk a little bit about 6 signs of what that might be. Okay, so the first one is an emotional token economy. So both insecure attachment styles, avoidance, which I'm going to refer to as rolling stone attachment style, and anxious attachment style.
I'm like so triggered. Just even before she starts this list, I'm so triggered, y'all. I'm sitting here been like, fuck that. I'm tired. I will never do this dynamic again. I've definitely been in this dynamic, and I'm just like, now that I know what I know, I'm like, never again will I date an avoidant. No. Oh man. But yeah, I think her list is like very spot on. I can look back at my own relationships and be like, oh, yep, that was there.
Which I'm going to refer to as an open heart attachment style. Both are preoccupied with sort of deriving a precarious sense of security through controlling their partner or the external conditions that impact the relationship. And that extends to controlling the thoughts, feelings, and or behaviors of their partners. So for example, anxious partners tend to implement what are called protest behaviors to try to establish or reestablish connection in an insecure relationship.
We'll take a second. I feel like on this stream, and also specifically tonight, I have done a lot of shitting on avoidance. I want to now take a second to shit on anxious people, because I think a lot of anxiously attached people around the internet and on social media, anxiously attached therapists, etc., people on message boards, all that, will kind of view avoidance as these like evil devil people, and anxious people are like these sweet, gentle, innocent people that just want love. Anxious people also do stuff that is toxic and harmful in a relationship. I'll attest to that. I myself have done stuff that I look back, I'm like, yeah, that really harmed the relationship. You know, at the time, I just wanted like reassurance and that my partner cared about me, but I realized I ended up doing manipulative behaviors that were probably just as toxic as them stonewalling me or being defensive or whatever. So both, again, this is to reiterate, neither party is without sin in an anxious avoidant trap. And what anxious people tend to do is these so-called protest behaviors of like being critical, of saying, you never take me out, you never, you know, that kind of stuff. Protest behavior. She'll talk about it more though.
And that might include excessive contact followed by sort of a punitive withdrawal.
Yeah.
Okay. Keeping score in the relationship or acting hostile. Also various forms of emotional manipulation. Okay. If you want to learn more about what I have to say about that, I invite you to check out my video on that called 4 Protest Behaviors, How the Anxious Partner Sends Mixed Signals in Relationships.
Yep.
And you can catch that on YouTube or on my blog. Now, for avoidant partners, on the other hand, they tend to exert a sense of control by practicing detachment and using deactivating strategies. Now, this might include verbally expressing an avoidance of commitment, but then acting as if you are committed, or verbally expressing a desire to commit, but then acting uncommitted. Okay. They may focus on the flaws in their partner the closer they get to that partner. They might pine for the one that got away to avoid emotional intimacy in the current relationship there.
Yeah, and avoidants do this a lot. 2 things that she mentioned I want to highlight. Avoidants tend to, there's like a, oh man, one of these days we'll do a deep dive on each attachment, do an entire stream just on each attachment style. There's like a whole, there's this guy online, I love his content. He has this thing called like the avoidant death wheel, which is like this cycle that avoidants just do. And he's got one for every single attachment style. So, but it's always like an avoidant will get in a relationship. They'll feel lonely. They'll get into a relationship. Immediately the intimacy starts to build. And once the intimacy starts to build, they'll start to flaw find in their partner, which causes them to pull away, which, you know, usually their partner's going to be like an anxious person or whatever, which they're pulling away to stabilize the relationship. Eventually, the avoidant's like, okay, I'm tired of all this drama. They'll break up, and then the cycle just begins again. Because the essential problem is these people are uncomfortable with intimacy, and until they deal with their fear of intimacy, the same way that an anxious person needs to deal with their fear of abandonment, right? Both sides of the coin have work to do. Until they get over that fear, they'll just keep blowing up relationship after relationship. It's actually really sad. A lot of avoidants will end up like just with a wreckage trail of relationships until they get in like their 30s, and they either become like that 35-year-old that we all know, whether it's man or woman, doesn't matter. That's like, all men are, you know, or all women are dogs, you know, whatever. Because they just never self-reflect to realize that the common denominator in all their broken relationships was them. Or they'll finally get to an age that they've had enough unsuccessful relationships to finally be like, man, the common denominator is me. I'm really uncomfortable with stuff. And some avoidants will finally go into therapy and work on their stuff and be able to have healthy intimacy with people and all that stuff. Unfortunately, avoidants tend to seek out this kind of information and even therapy in general a lot less than the other attachment styles. So it can be a rough life to be an avoidant sometimes. Anxious people too, they need to get to the point where they can self-soothe and not have this constant lurking fear of abandonment that causes them to over pursue, to over blow up their partner, to over, you know, try to manipulate to get their needs met and violate boundaries in order to get certainty, all that stuff
that they're having. Okay. And they may be hyper or hyposexual. And again, if you want to learn more about what I have to say about that, you can check out my video on breadcrumbing demystified 5 ways avoidant partners send mixed signals in relationships. Okay, again, that's on my YouTube channel or on my blog. There should be a link to my blog in the caption of this video. Now, both partners implement these strategies in a way that essentially creates like tokens of power in the relationship. It's meant to determine who has more emotional control in the economy of the relationship. Okay. Now, the second thing is there's a sense of stable instability about the relationship. You know, it may last for a very long time, years even. It might even be a marriage, but there's an element of uncertainty that still persists. So you may be together on the surface of things in name or in label, but the emotional and mental connection just isn't there. So On the other hand, you might have extreme highs and extreme lows that are reinforced by intermittent acts of intimacy. And those are usually followed by a withdrawal or some kind of bout of self-sabotage. Okay. Which leads me to my third sign, which is pointless fighting. Okay. So you might feel that you're constantly fighting about things that you just should not be fighting about at all. The arguments could be centered around something really concrete.
This is a key piece of evidence that you're caught in an anxious avoidant trap. If you have any inkling at all, you know, and maybe you don't know about attachment stuff, and you don't know your attachment style, and you don't know your partners, but a key sense that something much bigger and deeper is going on is there's this constant fighting, and you can never figure out what the hell it's even about. 99% of the time when there's just constant, and I've been in relationships too where it's like clockwork. We're just arguing about nothing like every week or every, you know, whatever. Usually the problem is actually arguing about intimacy, right? And I've kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, but one person wants a certain level of intimacy. The other person is uncomfortable with that level of intimacy. And again, it seems to be the avoidant that has like they want less intimacy in the relationship, and the anxious person wants more, right? And they can both be to an unhealthy level, right? But that gap can leave both people to be upset. And the anxious person's just like, I want to be with you all the time. Why aren't you giving me more intimacy? And the avoidant person's like, I just want more space. Why the hell won't you leave me alone? And then it's just fighting all over the time. That manifests as like, you never do the dishes. Well, you never leave me alone. You know, that kind of thing. Very, very common in the anxious avoidant trap. These constant fighting over nothing.
And seemingly unimportant. But really what it is it's a metaphor for the level of intimacy or the lack thereof between you in the relationship. So for example, you might there might be an irritance around ignoring the other partner's request for rolling the tube of toothpaste a certain way. And then all of a sudden there's a huge blow up and it turns into this giant argument that is really about feeling as if your partner doesn't have any regard for your feelings whatsoever. Okay. Now, the fourth thing is that you may be perceived as the enemy. So if you are the anxious partner, frequently you'll find that the closer you get to your partner, sometimes the worse you're treated. Yep. And this is because attachment wounds stem back to an earlier phase of childhood when we tend to see the world as good or bad, law-abiding or law-breaking. Okay, and this is true for both attachment styles. Now, in our partnerships, that kind of emotional reasoning gets stimulated, and then we project that early good-bad way of sorting things onto our partners. So if our partners are nice to us, they are good, and we must be doing good things. If our partners are mean to us, then either they are bad and intend to hurt us, or we did something to deserve it, and we have to find a way to make it right. Okay. Now, in the case of the anxious person or the open heart, the more connected that you become to an avoidant partner or a rolling stone, the more they will start to project their own needy parts that they dislike and reject in themselves onto you. But they will, and sometimes often that stimulates the need to reject it. But they're also still attracted to you, and that's for the same reason, because you cannot fully reject yourself, can you? And usually the struggle is learning how to love yourself, even when you've been taught to reject those parts of yourself. Okay.
And that's a good point she brings up, and we'll try to roll through the rest of this video pretty quick here for sake of time. But it's funny because the anxious avoidant trap is always this super toxic relationship, but buried at the heart of it is this acknowledgement by both people that what they really need to grow is in the other person. It's a complementary thing. So people tend to end up in relationships with people that are their complement, and not even just an attachment style in all things. So if you're like a quiet person, you tend to get with the person that's kind of more loud and outgoing, right? If you're the free-spirited, crazy person, which is always me in a relationship, you tend to get with someone who's a little bit more of a planner. So I've been in relationships with people that are more detail-oriented and like to plan and get satisfaction and checking off their to-do list, and I'm like, oh, that sounds terrible. So we tend to value in others what the qualities that we wish that we had inside of ourselves, right? And so a lot of times avoidance will have this acknowledgement of like, oh man, I'm really bad at with emotions and stuff. And so you get with this anxious partner because they're very emotionally available and they're very like attuned to other people's emotions and very expressive. And there's like a part of you deep down that's like, I know for me to be the healthiest version of myself, I need a little bit more of that inside of me. Maybe I don't want to be full on anxious, but I need a little bit more of that quality in myself. And what she's kind of pointing out is the solution is not actually to get with the partner that's our opposite and then try to make that work, because that's how you get the anxious avoidant trap. The solution is to grow in those qualities within ourself, right? So if I'm anxious, I can get better at self-soothing. I can get better at not blowing up my partner, you know, blowing up their phone with 20 text messages when they haven't texted me back in an hour. I can get better at creating a life full of stuff that I enjoy doing so that I don't need to be with my partner every second of every day, right? And if I'm the avoidant person, I can get better at expressing my needs and feeling like I'm worthy of doing that. I can get better at like letting someone in and being okay with the fact that I'm not a perfect human being, right? Can be better at accepting closeness with other people and not feeling that it's going to end, you know, up with you losing your freedom.
Now, if you are the Rolling Stone in this relationship, you'll find that the closer you get to your partner, the more that they will rely on you for their happiness and their satisfaction, to stimulate and their own sense of goodness, to prove to them their own sense of rightness about themselves, their own deservedness of love. And that starts to feel like a really heavy burden. And that's because their partner really feels more comfortable and secure in a state of merger. Okay. Now, this is, to my mind, the paradox of the anxious avoidant trap. Like, so the closer you become, the less you're actually able to see each other for who they really are, as opposed to your own self-projections. Okay. So fantasy plays a huge role in this, which we will discuss in a subsequent video. But as a result, when there is friction in the relationship, black and white thinking gets stimulated pretty instantly. And you tend to adopt the opinion that all the goodness that you perceived in your partner might have been a sham, and suddenly they're a malicious enemy intent on hurting you. Then you start fighting below the belt, and you're kind of unable to stop yourself from saying or doing things out of spite that you will later regret. That's
when the relationship gets really toxic, when you start
now,
personal attacking
the fifth one is feeling trapped. Now, when you think about it, this is really more for actually it's for both of you. When you think about it rationally and logically, you know the relationship is not really the healthiest thing for you, but you're too connected, what I'm going to refer to as addicted, to the other person's belief. And so open hearts, people with anxious attachment style, tend to tell themselves, this is the love of my life. If I can't make it work with them, I'll never find any other person that makes me feel this way. Okay. And so then they trap themselves into something that they know is not working. Okay, because they feel like that's the absolute best they could ever do. Okay, now avoid.
I'm gonna step away really quickly. I will be right back, but I will leave the video playing for you guys. Figure out how to do that. There we go. Be right back.
Individuals tend to feel trapped by that kind of emotional dependency and what they consider to be the high and insatiable expectations of their open-hearted partners. Right? They start to feel like that restricts their freedom. Okay. And the last one, number 6, the roller coaster effect. Okay. Now, in the relationship, you never feel as if you're on an even keel. Remember, we talked about that stable instability. Okay. Every once in a while, when the Rolling Stone gives or makes him or herself available to their open-hearted partner, the open-hearted partner's attachment system is sort of temporarily quieted. Okay, there's an achievement of that extreme sense of closeness, which is quite literally a high experienced in the same part of the brain as ingestive addictions. So they have this moment of deep intimacy and connection, because oftentimes individuals that have a Rolling Stone attachment are capable of this. Okay, but what happens is it kind of freaks them out. Right. So there'll be this moment of connection. The open heart starts to feel this high, like, oh, everything I imagined and fantasized and dreamed about and see how there is potential is possible. And then they're like, ooh, I'm all in. And then that freaks out the Rolling Stone partner, who's like, whoa, this has now become really overwhelming for me. It feels kind of like a loss of identity, or it starts to feel like, oh, now that my partner's got all these high expectations that I will never, ever possibly be able to live up to, I'm just going to disappoint them, so forth and so on. And that causes the Rolling Stone to withdraw or implement these deactivating strategies that we talked about, right? So then, or they may do something self-sabotaging, right? Which makes the open heart push them away instead, okay? And so then, of course, in turn, that activates the open heart's activating strategies. And so up and down we go in this sort of endless cycle and roller coaster, right? And so knowing what these 6 signs are really intended to help you to understand what the anxious avoidant trap looks like, because that's really a powerful step in putting your relationship and your feeling states into context. Okay. It can help you develop insight as well as sort of spaciousness around your internal feeling states and impulses and yearnings, which can sometimes feel so powerful. It's as if we have lost control of ourselves, right? But here's the thing. Insight can only get you so far, okay? Many individuals that struggle with attachment issues actually have tremendous insight into why they're struggling, in part because they're typically very analytical, all right? And that's because a lot of their energy has shot to their head, okay? Their intellect and their fantasy life really helps them get by in the face of emotionally disappointing or uncomfortable experiences, okay? But all that insight in the world, over time, you find it doesn't really help you feel any differently. And you still find yourself caught in these same unhealthy patterns, being attracted to the same unhealthy partners. But if you can shift that in your body, you can start to make more discerning choices in love. And that's because our attachment system is a biological, behavioral, physical, visceral mechanism embedded in the same part of our brains as our active chemical addictions, okay? And so in some, attachment experiences are bodily experiences, and our emotions are embodied as well, okay? So the body is kind of like a warehouse. It stores all the historical, emotional, and psychic energy attached to every intense experience you've ever had. And those experiences carry with them a particular charge. Okay, so every experience you have is translated in your brain into an electrical impulse. And those electrical impulses carve new neural pathways in your brain, in your musculature, and in your organs over time, right? Body memory, cell memory, muscle memory, okay? So understanding just how addictive the anxious avoidant trap can be on a chemical level, on a visceral chemical level, is useful in framing the healing process as one that is really similar to withdrawal from chemical addiction, okay? So in our next video, we're going to explore 4 neurochemicals that feed the anxious avoidant trap. And for those of you that are just stumbling across this video or on attachment theory in general, and you find yourself wanting to learn more, I invite you to check out a free 60-minute training that I offer. It's called The Enlightened Lover, Attachment Styles Demystified in 60 Minutes.
25%, so you're like, where's the last 5%? Last 5% are typically fearful avoidant, so that's a total of 100% there. Sometimes the ratios will be a little bit different. I've heard figures of about 10 to 12% actually for fearful avoidant, so somewhere around 5 to 10%.
Have a more avoidant attachment style and fear losing themselves. And these two people are very often in relationship with each other. My name's Ruthann. I'm a clinical psychologist and expert in relationships. And in this video, I'm going to give you practical strategies for how you and or your partner can begin to transform this very common relational conflict. And I'm interested, which side of this conflict do you most often find yourself on? Go ahead and let me know in the comments. If you have an anxious attachment style, then you're likely someone who pursues in the relationship. You're probably hyper attuned to any little moments of disconnection or conflict in your relationship. And these moments of disconnection trigger your anxiety and your fear of losing the relationship. And they drive you to make little bids for connection. You may try to start a conversation with your partner or initiate physical contact or intimacy, even if your partner may be busy and engaged in other activities. Often these bids for connection are attempts to soothe your anxiety and to get reassurance that your partner loves and cares for you.